This is going to be fun. I'm Reverend Dr. Alex G, and I'm sitting here with two of the goofiest people I know. So if you see them laughing, it's not that my editorial team forgotten to take out their laughs. This is probably just going to be interspersed throughout this whole thing. But Nehemiah turns 30 years old this fall, and so I'm here with Reverend Lilada Gee, my younger sister, and Reverend David Smith, who's one of the pastors at Door Creek Church. He's one of the site pastors. And we've actually been friends. Well, Lilada and I have been friends for our whole life. But the three of us have been friends for 50 years. We met on a Sunday school bus, or because of a Sunday school bus going to Midvale Baptist Church. David, I think we were like 7 years old. You used to ride the bus with your cousins. And so I think we were 6 or 7. I'm 58. And so we go way, way back. And so when I wanted to get things started or get things going, these are the people that I would go to. This was my go-to team back in the day. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about how Nehemiah was established. There's a saying that when you're young and sort of naive, you don't know what you're doing. The things that we were dreaming 30 years ago were audacious. And I don't know that I thought that what we were talking about in this space, I mean, we actually dreamed about Nehemiah in this space. I was preaching a series about Ezra and Nehemiah over in the old sanctuary, and we did the US program, Union Tabernacle Somerset.
Oh, yeah.
People know it as, what's it called now? Parker Place?
Yeah.
Yes, Parker.
Parker Place was called Somerset Circle, and we would go down there and do homework club with the kids, and then that grew into a program, and this new auditorium really takes up the old backyard where we used to actually have programs with kids. But we were dreaming and doing things that would last 30 years later. I mean, Sears and Roebuck is no longer in Madison,
Wow.
and Nehemiah is. And we were in our 20s thinking about changing the community.
Yeah.
Did you have any idea that we were trendsetters?
No, because we really didn't think like that. You know, we just knew what we wanted to do, and we wanted to do it. We wanted to do it for God, and we weren't thinking about making a name or being trailblazers. You know, we said, hey, let's do this. You know, it's in our heart, and let's do it. And so that's kind of how I was feeling about it.
Yeah.
And I would agree. I mean, I think we saw the need and we felt the pain of the community around us, and we wanted to do something about it.
You know, our lives were so intertwined. So again, we go back 50 years. And then, you know, we were part of the leadership. We were the leadership of Union Tabernacle Church. And so we would do outreach to campus. And so because of campus, you know, you met Tracy, you met Dwayne, I met Jackie. You met someone. You met a lot of people on campus, all right. Married some of them. We started dating around the same time, and you know, your wife and my wife were friends and knew each other, and you all hung out, and so it's just very interesting how our lives took this turn. And one of the things that is going to come out, I believe, we're working on a book also that commemorates Nehemiah's history, is the What If game. Do y'all remember what restaurant we used to go to play the What If game?
Ella's Deli?
It was Ella's Deli.
We did everything at Ella's Deli.
We group dated at
Place.
it was a
Yes, it
place.
was.
It was a place. And so we played the What If game, and we sit around and say, David, what if we started something and this is your job? And we said, what if we create a business and later you're the social worker, and your wife Tracy was an education major. And we said, Tracy, what if you were the school teacher? Jackie, what if you were the business manager? You fast forward, Tracy was a teacher at Nehemiah. You did social work at Nehemiah. I led Nehemiah as an organization. So we sat down over a grilled pound cake. That was some good. Number one. What's it called? Number one? The Hot Fuzz Sunday. We sat down. Yeah, they would close down Ella's Deli. We would stand in the parking lot, still playing the What If game, dreaming about what you could do. And so whatever it is the Spirit did in our hearts, or the way our parents raised us, or the way this community loved us, the fact is that as young 20-something, we had the audacity to stand outside and dream about the future, and not just contemplate how do we get through the moment, but how do we dream about the future? And we've lived long enough to see ourselves live into those dreams, and that's a tremendous blessing.
I mean, we all have 20-year-olds now.
Yes.
And I can't imagine my 20-year-old sitting down and doing and talking about the things that we did.
Oh
when we
my
were that
gosh,
age.
you're right.
Yeah, you know, so it's something special about what God was doing, you know, during that time, and you know, that's not to be taken lightly. I mean, that's
Right.
awesome. what
But
God
I
was
think,
doing.
I think the other thing though, David, is that we didn't start at 20.
Right.
We were
We were
teenagers.
in high school. Yeah.
Right.
Doing
Yes.
ministry,
Yes.
doing church,
We were.
doing Bible study.
Yeah.
And so by the time we were 20, we were
veterans.
we were
We-
seasoned.
we
knew
were
what we was
seasoned.
doing.
You're right.
Right.
Like when new people came to town and looked down on us because we were kids, we're like, we'll give them 3 months. Like we watch people come and go, come and go, come and go. But we were
Try to take over.
Yes.
right.
Yes.
But we were young, but we were trained to see what was authentic and what wasn't.
Yeah.
And we also knew how to care for each other. I remember in '92, Nehemiah started, of course, 30 years ago in '92, and Jackie and I lost our first child. So I know y'all were with us. We lost 2 daughters, but the first daughter we lost in '92, right around the time Nehemiah's first grant application was due. And I just remember, looking back now, I didn't have language for it, but I was depressed. I couldn't get up out of bed, couldn't come to work. It was tapping into my fatherhood stuff. I wanted to be a parent. And so I just said, I can't fill out that application. I just don't have the energy to be creative and talk about what this organization is going to do. And there was a buzz around this idea of these black leaders creating something to help promote youth involvement in our community. And I remember, Lilada, you saying they'd understand. The Community Foundation will understand. There's more than one cycle. You could just apply next year. But then you too said, you've already suffered a loss with the loss of your daughter. Let's not give it this organization. Let's fill out the application. And so we met in this building downstairs, and we pulled an all-nighter to write that application to the Community Foundation. I just have vague memories of it. But again, we were making history by writing that. We're here 30 years later and could have let that go. But I wonder, do you all remember some of that? I mean, life was foggy for me because of the loss of the baby, but I remember that little ugly red lamp I had and doing work downstairs.
Yeah. I know. I remember. And Lil was talking about some of the specifics of the application and the papers and all that. But I remember the conversation around the community, and I can remember how hot Madison Community Foundation was after your idea, of what Nehemiah, that they wanted you to apply. They were like begging you, please apply. And they really lifted up the vision. They helped us lift up the vision for it. And that's, I think weren't they the first?
They were the very first.
Yeah.
They sure
the
were.
first grant.
And I think that's historic when you look in Madison, because even within the last few years, it's been really difficult to see Black initiatives funded. And that's changed, in particular around Black women initiatives. That has really changed in the last 3 years.
It has.
So that was quite unique for a foundation, for a funding organization to believe that the solutions was going to come from within the community.
Yes, that's very true. And we had friends like Doug and Norma Madison who introduced us to Jane Coleman, and we knew Susan Phillips, and you helped me to get connected with the Community Foundation to take a trip to Germany to see the Hugendorfs, the youth youth programs, educational programs that had a living component to it. So the kids lived almost like college. They lived there. So you're right, David. They absorbed me. They brought me in, and they didn't know how to fund it because I was a pastor. And so they called it community leadership development. They wanted to invest in me. They wanted to make it clear that they were not investing in our church, because a lot of confusion. People thought Nehemiah was Union Tabernacle, as our church was called at the time. But they wanted to support Black leadership because we saw a rise in gangs. Remember so many things. You remember this, Lilada, as you became a social worker. Lilada, was a social worker for years at Dane County Human Services. Everything was about gang aversion. We wanted to make sure that all of our youth programming kept kids out of gangs. And so they saw us helping in that regard. And I remember one of the early board meetings, I think they held the meeting here where they approved our funding. They wanted to get out into the community, and the Community Foundation met in the youth room downstairs. So think about this. What 20-year-old kids are interacting with the likes of Mr. Frauchi?
Right. Well, think about it. That's sort of during that time, them funding a Black organization that really kind of opened the door for a lot of organizations
Wow.
that came after that 30 years ago. You know,
Right.
That's true,
a lot of
David.
organizations today that are led by blacks would not be funded if it
Absolutely.
weren't for that door kind of being open for us.
Absolutely.
That's important to think about. David, you were telling a story earlier about when we were trying to find a home for Nehemiah, and we were looking at space.
Yes.
Come on, David, spill it, because we know
Right.
David's going to tell it, right?
David's gonna tell
You
it.
know David's going to tell it. And,
Right across the street from the church, we were looking at some apartments. I think it was called Badger
Parkway.
Parkway, yes.
Yes.
We were looking at some apartments, and you know, we all took the tour, and
Because we're going to put our programs in it, right? We're going to put our after-school programs in
ACE
it.
program and all that. So we were looking at the space. You said, "Oh, Alex, this would be your office over here, and then the after-school program be over here." You know, and we were talking about having to remodel it and do all of that. And we were excited about it. We were excited about that space over there. And it just shows you how God looks out for you. So one of our volunteers, if you remember, one of the volunteers was at an appointment somewhere, and the landlord happened to be in that same building, and he was telling one of his colleagues or something, yeah, I'm meeting with this church, this black church, who's going to be remodeling, and I'm jacking the price up, you know, because hey, they won't know, you know, kind of giving it. And the volunteer overheard him and recognized
I remember that.
the facility he was talking about, and came back and told you. And you just took it from there, and we stopped.
Wow.
And I think he tried to explain and try to apologize and all that.
That's coming back to me now and trying to re-engage us in it.
Yes. And we're like, no, we ain't having that.
No, we're going to take our money someplace else.
Right.
Lilada, what are some of the early things you remember? I mean, there's probably hardly a Nehemiah program you didn't design, shape, or evaluate. What are some of the memories you have of the early days?
The home cooked meals at Ace. For whatever reason, that just kind of came to mind. Like,
So-
you come over working because we'd have long days working.
And that was our elementary program, the Academic Center for Excellence.
Yeah, and then we come over to the church and get a plate, and then you just could finish doing what you were doing. I
Yes.
just remember it just being all in. Like, there was just passion that continued. I remember the early days, I would take work home every single day. You know, have a full day, take work home, and still think about it, because everything was new. We were starting everything from scratch.
Yes.
And developing the programs and bringing on the staff and things of that nature. And so what sticks out to me the most is kind of I think the energy of the children, the young folks, and how they felt in the space. You know, the people in the Academic Center for Excellence program, for the ACE program, and then the youth program, just how much at home the children and the young folks felt. That sticks with me.
Yes. You know what else I think about? We love the word center. We love centers. There's the Academic Center for Excellence. There's the Nehemiah Center for Urban Leadership Development. There's the Center for Black Excellence and Culture.
Yes.
We like acronyms, and we like centers.
Love acronyms. That's a must.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you remember those Saturday morning meetings, those planning meetings we would have once a month or every other week to sort of plan out what Nehemiah would do? John Smith would sort of would lead those sessions, and we'd have people come together from across the community. That process went on for a year in thinking and planning. And you know, some of the things that we did to plan, to do round robins, I see happening with city planning. You know, those skills are things that have evolved. We're watching things that you do when you want to bring about real community change.
Do you remember your first hire?
You talking about my assistant?
Yeah.
Holly.
Holly, yes.
Holly.
Holly
I hope
was
Holly
the
gets to see this.
first,
Holly Smith.
Yep, she worked in it, and it seemed like we had to convince you to be paid. it seemed like we had to convince you, because it was in your heart, it was your passion, and it seemed like you said, you know what, we're gonna get this done. He said, well, when we got the grant, we can pay you, so we can pay. He said,
I was scared.
You remember that? He said we had to
A
convince him.
little bit, yeah.
He said, this is a job now, Alex. This is what we wrote.
I was like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh man, Holly was a kid who grew up around us. Tremendous young lady. She and her husband Sig have raised beautiful kids. They're doing great things, and she lives in South Korea now, I think. But great musician. But she was had grown up around us as, maybe, 7, 8 years younger, but she came in, but she was a good editor. She could type, and we had these great big old computers. Remember Kareem programmed it. It was only 40 megabytes, not a gig, 40 megabytes. And Kareem said, you will never, ever, ever use up all this hard drive. It was 40 megabytes.
I thought it was 1 meg.
No, it was 40. It was 40. And listen, my watch takes up, Christmas cards that have music to them do. But we were advanced. We got computers, and I don't know if y'all remember this, because I like technology. Remember, I used to go to Radio Shack and play with all the realists.
Yeah.
We got intercoms and put them in my office, in your office, and ran wires along the baseboard, because we only had one line on the phone. So Holly would push channel 1 to say, Pastor, there's a call for you, or push number 2 to tell you. So we get a buzz on the intercom, so we know to pick up. It was like the party line. Hey, Pearl, give me the receptionist. You may not remember that, but we had wires running all the way down because we didn't have a phone line. It was those 2 realistic intercoms and 1 phone line.
Wow.
Y'all thought you was advanced.
Okay.
Man. But you know what? And I tried to get a cool phone number. People probably don't know this, but our phone number for Nehemiah is 608-257-2453. Build. B-I-L. You remember that? B-I-L-D. Build. And
So special.
and then Found in Life is 5433, which is life. But Build, that's come on, that's cool, right? B-I-L.
Build life.
Build. That was
cool.
What number would you have picked?
5.
Yeah, you probably would have remember it. Something random. And then would have forgot it the next. Oh my goodness. Oh my. If I think about it, if I consider a signature moment, it's not actually in ACE's program, but it's fast forwarding. There's a young guy who was going through just some transition at work in his graduate program. And I pulled up to the church just a few years ago, and he was standing outside and just said, hey, Pastor, I just needed somebody to talk to. But I knew him as a young kid in the ACE program. And it struck me, man, 20 years ago, this is where he came to hang out every day, 3 days a week after school to get support. And when he needed to process with some older adults, an older man, he was just standing in front of the church as I pulled up. And I just thought, Coach Gordon, one of my mentors from Lawndale, said, if you're going to invest in kids, you got to do it for a whole generation for 20 years. Don't stop. If you're going to be there for people, be there for people. So I love that. People who were served in our programs felt loved.
That's interesting that you say that when you're talking about the U.S. program.
Yeah,
in
you're right.
Somerset.
Right.
The Woods family, remember?
Yes.
Gina.
Yes.
I ran into D'Angelo Moore, his name was.
That sounds familiar.
He was, the kid, D'Angelo.
So not Regina.
Regina was one of the families. They were close, the Woods and the Moore family.
Okay.
Two of the families I used to work at Midvale School. And he said he had the same sentiments. He said, you've been around our family, working with our family for all these years, and so they know who to search out and who to look for. And they remember that as little kids, they remember the impact that they had. And Regina constantly talks about the impact that the church had on her life and her kids, John and Jason and Katrina.
My goodness. Yeah, just we love those kids, and they accepted that love. Do y'all remember before ACE really got going, do you remember that there were kids who lived in the trailer park across the street?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was Russell and CJ.
I remember them.
Tiara was a little girl, cute little kid. Their mother's name was Pam. Remember we used to have a basketball rim out here?
Yeah.
They were playing, we pulled up.
Replace that thing.
And when we came out, they thought they had to leave. So they started leaving. We said, you don't have to leave, come back. And so we started playing with them and built a relationship. They started coming. They got involved in children's program, got to know the mom. But we would just see kids and that was something special, you all.
The other thing that I think is special is the relationships that our kids have had over the years because of the years that we've been in ministry. Yeah. They have developed their own relationships in very meaningful ways. And I think that's really special because we worked a lot. Church was a huge part of our life. Nehemiah was a huge part of our life. And so that meant a lot of commitment and sacrifices that our children saw.
Right.
And so for them to be able to still be in relationship today. It's just, I love that part too.
And they are just as silly as we are.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're not as funny as
They're
we
not
are,
as
though.
funny, but they are.
Yeah.
They try to
Yeah.
be. But I remember one of the impacts that Nehemiah has had on our lives is Tracy had been working as an after school teacher.
Sure.
And I think we had two kids then, Tiara and David. David was a baby, little baby, and
Is this baby? This me's baby?
Yeah, he was in the carrier.
Oh, okay, I got you. Oh,
was
he
in
was
the
a
carrier.
baby. He was a baby.
We were painting him.
Painting him.
And I was working at the community center. I was like, wait a minute now. We've invested a lot of time and things into the program. Our kids, need to be a part of this. So as they got older, all five of my kids, all five of them. Tiara probably the less because she was a baby when Tracy was working, but Tracy used to bring her to work.
Oh my, that's right.
But David Jr. worked with the
He was a
summer
teen coach.
program-
He was a teen
summer
coach.
program. Yep. He was a coach. Tiana was a coach. Tamia was a coach, and Daniel was a junior coach. So all of our kids either participated in the program or worked. And I remember David and Tiara was in the program, and Fabu said, "What was that song? Do you know who you are?"
Yes.
Do you know who you are? When we were over at Shalom,
Yes.
they were using the
Oh,
building
my
for
goodness.
that summer because the program had grown.
That's right.
Yeah, and you were at Good Shepherd at one point.
Oh, my
'cause the program
goodness.
just kept growing,
Yeah.
and now you got your own building.
We were at High Point one summer, weren't we?
Yes.
And then we were at Black Hawk when it was on Whitney Way.
Wow.
Yeah, I think to me, the best thing about what we've done over the past 30 years is the fact that we've stayed engaged with some of the kids that we work with. And to me, the best part was the fact that our children worked in the program that nurtured them,
Yes.
and they became the nurturers.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
To me, to be able to see that those who were invested in came back and invested.
Yeah,
That's the best part of it, I think.
And you all, I get lots of credit for Nehemiah for jumping out there, leaving the university and starting it. But you all were really innovative and creative. Like, Dave, do you remember Lilada created a career day? Like, she would have all those young black girls. She would have black doctors and black professors coming in to talk to the girls and having program booklets and historic people like Miss Bernard and other people.
I love that program.
Yeah.
It was
Youth Enrichment Service that you had.
that was the umbrella, but that was called
Yes and yep.
it was called the Nefertiti Career Day.
Nefertiti, yeah.
The Career Day.
Yes.
Yes, I love that
Nefertiti.
program.
You did a fashion show too, didn't you?
Cotillion.
Cotillion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cotillion for
No,
young
church
girls.
was the fashion
Well, the
show.
fashion. I still got a picture of my fur coat.
Yes. No, you're right. But you're right. You did the cotillion, where so many girls went through this, and now you're talking to the daughters of the girls. Like you're going into schools. You're like, wait a minute, what's your name? What's your mother's name?
Yeah.
Then you're like, girl, your mother was in my program 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
We used to come in here and you would have like 20 Nefertiti girls in that room downstairs, talking to them about everything about life and
Yes.
depression and all kinds of things that they were going through. Just really walk through life with kids. Give it here. It's my turn.
She did me first.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. These are mine.
But Lil has always had that passion of protecting girls. And it's so wonderful to see how that has developed. Through the years. I think early on you didn't really know what to do with it and really what it was, but you knew it was something.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. When you know you got something, you gotta stick with it because eventually you're gonna find out what it is and it's going to reveal itself. And And that was a gift, and your gift made room for you, you know?
I appreciate that, and I think as a word of encouragement to people who may be watching this and you're thinking of, you have an idea, is that give yourself the opportunity for that idea to grow, to morph, to mature. Like, it doesn't have to stay the same thing, you know, because over time you really get a deeper sense of what you are to do in this season, and I think that's important.
You know, David, one thing you may not remember is that Nehemiah had 4 principles. And part of what happened was, and you shaped the one having to do with housing and economic development. I don't know if you remember that, because John, who was help us to think through the planning process. You know, I'm a visionary. I can sit around, eat donuts and drink coffee and just, hey, what about? And then go home and nothing happens and feel good about it. We have fun today. We had some donuts. But you spoke into the part, David, that has to do with reentry and its housing and its economic development now. But that was the part you did. You kind of worked on youth and the youth piece. We had the children's piece. We had the family empowerment. But then the 4th one was housing and economic development. And that's the one you spoke into. And that's the piece that's been coming alive. It's taken us about 25 years to really move to economic development. But that's another thing to think about. Our focus, I said, we have 4 pillars for 30 years. Youth leadership, academic assistance or support for children, youth leadership development, family empowerment, and economic development and housing. And so we all shaped those pillars that 30 years later are still standing.
When we first started talking about the idea of Nehemiah, I don't know that we all saw ourselves as necessarily being a part of it, but more so initially supporting your vision,
Right.
and what you felt like you wanted to do. And I think that as conversations went on, we saw various ways that we were able to insert our thoughts, ideas, experience, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And because at the time I was working for the county, I had a good government job.
You sure did.
I had some benefits and whatnot, yeah. And so I wasn't anticipating leaving that situation. And then I kind of got a little forced out after I started working with Nehemiah, because there was a feeling of thought by my supervisor that it was a competition. And he kind of like encouraged me to kind of leave. And
I forgot that.
yeah, and so, but I was happy about it because I had been doing social services and working in schools since I was in college and had been out a while. And I didn't like, even in the short amount of time that I did social work, I didn't like the way it was going. I didn't like the way I felt like I was being really inauthentic and being really kind of hands off with people. I didn't like the way that I was engaging with people. And so what I imagined when I kind of got that encouragement to just go ahead and leave to do Nehemiah was that I could do this work in a different way, that I could engage with people in a way that felt organic, that felt authentic. And that's kind of how it went. And then, you know, I just kind of saw myself in all kind of ways that I hadn't necessarily seen myself before and doing things that I had done before.
What people don't realize, because in the early days, people would say, oh, well, you're working with your family. I was approached by a local businessman who basically was working with, at the time, our county executive was Rick Phelps. And they were creating a program called Children Come First, where they were funding organizations to keep children with severe emotional disturbances in the community, because our children were going to mental health hospitals and juvenile correctional facilities at a disproportionate rate.
Right.
He said, I need your sister. He actually said, I need your mom, because your mom does family therapy and your sister's a social worker and can do case management. Can I contract Nehemiah so that you can hire your sister away from the county? So while the lady was being pushed out, I actually had a businessman come and to contract with us in order to cover Lilada's whole salary and benefits and hire mom. And so on one side, people would just say, oh, his family's there. This man said, I can't do this without a black woman as a social worker and a black woman as a therapist. And so what will it cost? And we sat down and did the budget together. And that contract paid everybody at Nehemiah, including the ones that were complaining. It paid all of us for a year and a half until the community support specialist contract came in. So it's just important to realize that the latest profile and her work with social services gave us credibility, but someone saw the validity of our programming and actually contracted us. That was Michael Dunham.
People always want to say stuff about family, but to be clear that, like, usually when you're up and close and working with someone like this, like, I worked for weeks, months, I don't know how long, for free.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? And so there's this level of sacrifice that I think that we all brought to the table because we believed in the vision.
Right. You all did.
I can remember, you probably don't remember this, Lil.
Uh-oh.
I can remember I was at a meeting at the neighborhood house, a center directors meeting. Mm-hmm. And I remember running into you. You were working, I think, for NIP or somebody. You were working for something for the county. Yeah. You had an office or something there at neighborhood house. And I remember seeing you, seeing you. You know, you just look like, I'm not enjoying this. You know, the job that you were doing, and and so to see God open doors when someone is pushing you out, you know, and God is opening the door. Right, a lot of times that push out is the hand of God.
Yes.
You know, it's because sometimes we don't listen, and He gently, you know, will give us a little nudge to get us going in the right direction. And so
that's a good point,
blessing.
David.
But you know, I like that what you said. Her profile, you know, what you know, for what people knew about you, opened up the doors for a lot of lot of programs.
And David, we were afraid to work for ourselves. So it wasn't just leaving the county, going to work for the neighborhood house. We weren't used to black people working for black people. We were kids.
Right.
So who did we know? Who could we look to? Even the other nonprofit. Let's just say Urban League. It was being run at the time by Steve Brongen, Betty Franklin Hammond. Those were established organizations. People knew what the Urban League was. They knew what these organizations. They knew what NAACP was. Nobody knew what Nehemiah was. They couldn't pronounce it. Like Nehemiah. Like what is it? What is it? What does it mean? We were young people finding money, hiring people, and we had benefits, and staff didn't have to pay for benefits. I mean, we were doing big things in those days.
So we were meeting with bank presidents about closing on Martin Luther King Day.
We sure did. I sure do.
Bob Gorsuch, you and I, you know,
Went to Park Bank and said, we're not going to close. We're not going to close for King Day. We're like, I bet you are.
Bet you
Bet you are.
And did he?
Yes, they did. Click, click, click.
Lock the door.
Well, he had me come and give a speech to them after they locked the door. The people sat there and looked at me like, I was like, oh, man. I said, I don't want to do this.
Well, that's because you used to work with some of them. And they think, who did he think he was?
Right. I remember when he couldn't balance a drawer. Now he going to shut us down.
Right. You know, I'm also remembering, I was thinking about this on the way over here. There was a time and point where me and you had a good little argument. We don't argue that much, but we had a really good argument. And you went and told David on me.
Oh, that time.
Yeah. And David said to you, and you said to me that, and David, you had told him, well, why isn't Lil doing her own thing? She should be doing her own thing right now. And that really gave me the push to start leaning into a more directed work that I'm doing today. You know,
That's true.
And we still have worked cooperatively over the years and in partnership, but that really helped me. But it was because of everything I absorbed in watching from Nehemiah from the very beginning and those seeds. I was able to take that and get that nudge because now it was my turn to have a nudge towards my thing. But I took everything that I had learned and building Nehemiah.
That's powerful.
To build my organization. And when I did this, I think it was back in like 2010. I don't know why you're talking about me behind my back, but anyway, you either.
He came to me.
But you were ready. You were ready. You were like,
so ready to
tell
do
me,
what
tell
I
me.
needed to do. Right. Anyway.
I wanted perspective.
Right. But.
Don't like y'all never talked about me.
Oh yeah, we had a day.
I know y'all did.
And vice versa.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, David, I never talked about you with Alex. But I was just thinking about it, was like 2010. And I didn't know then. Now it's my turn to figure out, can I do this? Can I do this on my own? Can I survive? And here, 12 years later, you know, my work, my passion, my call has sustained me.
And grown.
Yes, yes.
You weren't doing art back in those days. We forgot you were an artist.
I forgot I was an artist.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I want to, thank you for that. I was mad at you at the time and mad at you at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And then mad at y'all together. But it was really a helpful push for me to say, okay, come on. Come out of that corner. Can't hide.
Can't hide.
But that's when sometimes the best things come about, you know, because you're mad about something. You're mad at somebody about something they said, and then you think about it and you say, you know, there's a little truth to that. There's a lot of truth to that, and you know, and you act on it, and God has all kind of ways of getting us to do what we want to do, you know.
We used to have the community unity dinners. I remember one time we got a lot of churches together. I remember the pastor, Bill White from Bethel, was there. It was a Saturday night, and someone said, "How did you get preachers out on a Saturday night?" We had the soul food dinner, but we did a program together. We sat at a front table and shared a vision for how we wanted to create something that was going to serve the needs of the black community. But even in our early 20s, we knew that it was important to get the buy-in of stakeholders. So to invite people in to talk about that, and those people became funders of the whole organization. So there was just so much that we did that no one said, this is how you roll out a nonprofit. And Nehemiah was not formed at the time. We didn't have any money, but we shared that vision with the broader community and those church folks. And people showed up to respond to us and trusted us.
And we had the well services.
Yeah.
Yes,
that was a part of the sort of.
I was just thinking about
Nehemiah
that.
with
Those were monthly ecumenical
Yeah.
worship services, Catholic, Protestant,
Yeah.
black, white, charismatic, non-charismatic.
You know, one thing sticks out for me during the early days when we were planning, when we went to the hospital room of Dr. Schalk. I might be saying this wrong.
No,
Correct.
Don Schalk, you got it right.
Don Schalk. And it stuck out to me that this physician was so enthralled with the vision that he didn't want to miss it. He wanted to be a part of it, even to have us all come into his hospital room. You know, like sometimes you need someone else to demonstrate to you how important of what you're doing. And so I think, you know, community-wide, I think it's important for the general community to understand how important it is for that affirmation and that support.
He denied medicine. He had a biking accident, hurt his shoulder, I think, refused medicine because he was afraid he'd be too loopy. And so he dealt with the pain. He told his wife, Joanne, I don't want any medicine. And we had our very first Nehemiah planning meeting at UW Hospital in this room. You're right.
I remember
That was special.
that. Yeah.
Nehemiah taught me, it was a whole educational process. Rolling out our initiative, Justified Anger, was helped by what I learned with Nehemiah, listening, getting the support of the black community, knowing how to talk to the powers that be, consistency, planning the Center for Black Excellence in Culture. I learned those skills from everything Nehemiah taught me. Were there things that you learned during the process of developing Nehemiah that you think you took into aspects of your work? Because we're all social entrepreneurs.
One of the things is that what helped you, I think, help you polish yourself in speaking to groups of people and sharing your ideas. I think we were your practice.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, for you to share and to Lil was better at this and pushing back. You know, she was better at challenging you. I was more the A-man corner, you know, and Lil would be, well, what about, you know, well, are you sure? You know, but but I think it helped you that when you went to talk to other groups and other people that because you know we can be challenging, you know, sometimes and push you to to your limits, but you survived it. And looking at you now, you know, you're raising $35 million for the Center of Black Excellence, and you know, that's big.
That is a good point. We did challenge each other.
I think one of the best things I learned, and I think I'm still learning from our process, was that you need a community around you. You know, you don't need to be the Lone Ranger. You really need folks who believe in you, to support you, to help you get something off the ground, to hold you accountable, to encourage you when you want to give up. And I think that's what's really a really key thing, because I've seen a lot of, over the last 30 years, a lot of great initiatives start off, but they're very much personality driven, very much solo focuses. And then those just kind of fall by the wayside. And it's not that they weren't great ideas, but people didn't have support around them.
Right.
And I think that's something that you really modeled with Nehemiah. I think the other thing is that the dignity part, like working with people with dignity and not treating them just like they're something to be fixed. I mean, this is something that we've continued to talk about and look at, but like, how do you engage and you bring your whole self in a very authentic way, with people that they know they can count on you. Like you and David both talked about how these young men showed up just on grounds, finding you, looking for you because you all have been there. And I think one of the most sobering moments I had was when one of my former girls called me up to say, could she get together with me and her teen daughter, who was just kind of going awry, and she wanted me to talk to her teen daughter. And I think that was the first time that I was just like, oh my God, this has been bigger than even what we thought it was. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And one thing I want to make sure is just stated for the record is you all have been around. I mean, Nehemiah's 30 years old, but you all were doing things in leadership before that. And Madison's gotten excited about a lot of new people who arrive. But we need to remember, you all have been here a long time, doing work, unsung heroes, behind the scenes. And when you're young, it's not always easy to get behind another person's vision. And you all were able to get behind that, bring others into it, and bring it to fruition. And man, it's been 30 years. I mean, when you think about the planning phase, it's longer than 30. The fundraising phase. But 30 years ago, we opened our doors, brought me and Holly into the office, started paying us to get the work going. And there's not a lot of people that can say, we were part of starting something from the ground, and 30 years later, it's way stronger than it was. So I appreciate the way you two supported me and supported the community, because again, we're doing things that weren't being done in this community.
And just think about it. Some of the other nonprofits that started with a bang and no longer here. The Nehemiah is still here. And I think one of the great challenges that you had, and you still might have it, you might not because you're such a seasoned veteran with this now, but one of the things was keeping the church and Nehemiah separated. I mean, really, it's hard when you're passionate about two things that are so close, that are in the same building, and led by the same person. It's hard, and some of the same founding people are both.
Sure.
It takes a skill and a talent to be able to keep them separate and to talk about visions for each of them, because you knew and understood that some funders, you had to be able to talk about the vision without making it sound like it was a church thing,
or it's religious.
Yeah. And
that's a good point,
so I think
David.
really developing that's now it's probably real easy now, because really the center and Nehemiah kind of it's its own entity, takes on its own thing, and now FOL tied to that is almost like like oh that too, but before it was like, oh, aren't they the same thing?
People are actually doing that with the center and Nehemiah now. People are asking me, are they the same thing?
And it's so you got really, is it like three different things? FOL, Nehemiah, and then the center. So
all separate 501c3s, all separate boards, and all separate financial systems.
So you got
But David, you're right. To have the vision, to drive it all together but keep it separate was a skill. Probably made me wake up a lot of days with some anxiety attacks. Lily, I was going to say this. You about to say something?
Well, I just want to say quickly that I think a part of the innovation and being pushed and observing innovation, I don't think you get the credit you deserve for bringing in the Boys and Girls Club to Madison.
Right.
That was your innovation.
The South Madison Neighborhood Center became the Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah, it was.
And the community talked about David.
Right.
Like people love the Boys and
Girls.
What are you doing? What are you bringing? This is our community.
It's always been this way. But I think because you were a part of innovation, it gave you in another form to bring in innovation.
That's a good point.
And to me, always, any ways that the Boys and Girls of Dane County prospers, I always put that on your account. because you brought that in. That was your vision that you saw through.
And it was uphill. Again, we have to stress uphill.
It was an uphill
It wasn't like
vision.
people were
You
saying
fought
good
on it.
because it wasn't in our
Yeah.
community. We didn't
Right.
know what it was about. Dave, it's interesting. The South Madison Neighborhood Center was called, everybody called it the Center. They didn't say the full name. They didn't call it the initials. And so when we started designing the Center for Black Excellence in Culture, I said I want its moniker to be the center, because people who are from Madison will hear that and say, I remember the center as a place where we gather. So it's important for us to know that history and to tell that history that we're getting back to that. One thing that we developed together at Nehemiah, it's a social construct. I think we had some theological framing for it. Two, when you look at the story of the exiles returning back to their homeland in the book of Nehemiah, the people who lived in the ruined areas rebuilt it. So we established this practice that we didn't want the outside to rebuild the south side. We wanted people here to control their destiny. That drives us even today with the work of the center.
Yes.
That it is all about indigenous leadership development, empowerment of the people closest to the issues. But we're doing that, you all, in the early 90s. We're talking about we're going to support ourselves. And so instead of just serving young kids like you were doing, we said, let's bring the parents in. Why are we going to let, why are we going to let the mentors get all the credit, or the people that's going to take the kids to Great America? Let's bring the parents in. So remember we started doing those parent nights, those family nights that you helped to design, where
so nice.
we would have, you order chair massagers and things for the moms while we had movie night for the kids and meals. Because we thought traditional children's programming will take the children away from the parents and become the heroes. But we started bringing the parents along and empowering people, and that still enriches the work that we do today. But we learned that together here.
And one thing I was just thinking about, we were talking about that, is the fact that, with the three of us, and just like over the years doing ministry and work in the community, I always felt like you all saw me as an equal. And that's just not always true when you're doing male, female, particularly like in that time. I mean, the 90s wasn't that long ago, but you still had all of these different separations of what you thought that a woman could do. But you all, I felt, always supported my leadership and my ideas. And that meant a lot, because that just really helped me to feel strong in what I was doing when I went on to my next thing. Your belief and support, and brotherhood, to me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
We know you. Punch us out.
Punch you out, but y'all know I would fight for you.
Yes, you would.
I would fight on your behalf. You know that.
Wow.
Still.
But I remember when Orlando Bell left the neighborhood center, and they didn't want to appoint me as the interim director.
Because you were the assistant director?
Yeah, I was assistant director. They didn't want to appoint me interim director. The lady that was over the whole center system wanted to be the interim director. And I remember Lil standing up in that meeting, and she said, I don't think that's a good, you know how Lil can do it. She said, I don't think that's a good idea, and you stood up for me. She said, we think David should be, he's here and da-da-da. And that night, she dropped that idea of her being yeah. Yes.
Oh, well, my Lord. You owe me a dinner.
Yeah, we were kids standing up, speaking truth to power, talking to presidents of banks, or speaking up in a meeting on David's behalf. David's from here. What you gonna bring here?
Right.
Yeah.
We've had to fight for the right. We've had to fight for the right to really lead in our own community.
Right.
Yeah.
And
People forget about you. People forget, because people love when somebody new comes in riding on a horse. Yes, riding on a horse. And then when they get in trouble, or when they don't know what to do because of certain things, and
Or
they
when
either
they
leave. Yep.
Right? And I think that's the thing too that's important to underscore here. We never left. Right. We grew up here, we grew here.
Raise our kids.
We raised our kids here. We have stayed true and tried and true and committed to
this community.
To this community. It's never been a job for us. It's always been a calling, and it's always been a lifelong commitment. I'm gonna get out of here from these winters. But other than that, it's been a lifelong commitment that we even have then now brought our children into in their own way. Like my daughter now, all our kids work for Nehemiah as teens, but now my daughter works for Nehemiah. It's been a lifelong commitment that now we're passing on to the next generation.
And my daughters, two of my daughters, have worked with your organization.
Yes, one
One is working with her now, and Tiana loved it when she was doing it. And so it's support.
Right. And you think about your fundraising, the budgets that you're managing, the programs you're managing, what I'm managing. We were kids writing that grant all night for a $20,000 gift, and combined, we're dealing in multi-million-dollar budgets, and we were trying to get and we got the $20,000. But just think about how we've grown.
But wasn't it a matching? It was a matching.
Oh, it was a
grant.
matching grant.
Yeah, so you had to raise $20,000.
Had to raise $20,000.
Yeah,
so they gave it to us, and I was just
believe in you, but not that much.
right,
well,
exactly.
But back in those days,
challenge grant.
But the challenge grant they were really big there. Yeah. But it was a way to see, are we missing something? Does the community get this? Within 2 weeks, Craig Barnes, who was the pastor of Christ Presbyterian Church, had already rallied the other churches. So when they said this is a challenge grant, within 2 weeks, the $20,000 was raised.
Okay, you know what's weird about that is that was 30 years ago, and you saw the white churches come and support the vision of this black community. I don't think we're in a better spot 30 years later. I don't think that same level of support would be as easy to gain in our current climate, and I think that's something that we have to think about as a community. What are we supporting? How we're supporting it? And are we going forward? I think it'd be harder to do now. To have a room full of cross denominational churches,
very
black
ecumenical.
and white, come together
Catholic,
and
Protestant.
agree that yes to one thing, yes, this is something to support.
I agree, but I also think there are some of those things going on. Maybe not as people aren't as creative with their ideas, But I think there's a lot of ecumenism going on, amongst the church. But I don't think there's a group that Nehemiah is sort of a once or very few in a lifetime kind of thing that's going to happen. I don't think anybody can come and sit down and say, we're going to do this too. We're going to duplicate. I mean, this was God driven and God given, and I don't think you can sit it. It's not something, as you say, well, this is a prototype for you guys that do it.
It wasn't a program.
Right. Because you gotta have the passion, you gotta have the vision, you gotta have the investment, of your time, of your energy, your family, all of that. You gotta have that. And so for the center now, to be able to get not just churches, but to get government, to get businesses, foundations, to buy, and individuals, families. The first donors. Families, black families.
Right.
That just hadn't been done.
Right.
Hadn't been done, and like I said, I don't think it's something that people say let's duplicate this.
Right. Very iconic.
Very iconic.
And I'm glad that we're pausing. I mean, just don't forget your thought. But what David just shared is profound. We just have to think about that. It was the timing, it was the energy, and it was the readiness that you can't. It's just hard just to duplicate that. And it was something very special about that timing.
Yeah.
And what we did and what we pulled off.
But I was thinking about, like, when you had some of the early meetings for Nehemiah and you pulled together these pastors, it was the first time that those white pastors had ever been in the same room with those same white pastors. So it was
in that youth room downstairs. I remember when Warren Heckman met who was the guy who created High Point? It used to be Middleton Baptist Church before Mugford. Dick Sisson. I remember them introducing themselves, and then Bill White from Bethel. They created a downtown pastor association, pastors of large churches. They met in our youth room. They saw each other on TV because, Bethel was on TV, other churches on TV. Those pastors met here.
Did he just take over my story?
I'm sorry,
Yeah, well, he was just kind of
pausing.
pausing.
Oh, okay. But that was the special, so that even in the work that you were doing, that wasn't the work, that was the process. But that even created something that was special, that was needed, that hadn't been done before. And so again, going back to your point about this has been an iconic process in many, many ways.
Wow.
Yeah, to be read about, to be studied about, possibly in Black history classes, that this is, the work that has been done. Because, you're talking about in the center, you're talking about displaying history of Black people, and not just Madison, but even in the South Side. And there's some deep, good history
Yes.
about Blacks and their contribution here in South Madison. So to see that, in a museum or however it's going to be displayed in the center, that's something the kids,
Yes.
grandkids, and great grandkids will be able to study and to learn about. We won't have to go downtown or to the Wisconsin Historical Museum, right? It wouldn't be, or you really have to look for it. You come up with allergies from the dust and everything. But yeah, it's So that's gonna be great.
Wow. This has been a journey, and as I said earlier, not a lot of people do anything for 30 years, and man, I've enjoyed it. I'm tired, and there are days I just thought I don't want to do this anymore. But we have a fantastic staff and energy and vision and morale, and we're doing things at a level I've never envisioned. And so I thought at 30, I think about where we were at our 20th anniversary, and that maybe at 30, we'd have to convince people to stay with us, and here's what we're going to be doing. Instead, we're going to be reflecting on impact. Instead of trying to convince people where we're going, that's established. People know that we're here for the long haul. But to pause and look back, including conversations like this, to know 20-something kids were sitting down thinking about what could be, that's informed the innovation space that I'm building inside the Center for Black Excellence in Culture. I want 20-something-year-olds to sit down and work in space together and have coffee and laptops and say, what if we create this business, or what if we do this, or what if we do that? And so I'm just proud of the fact that the work continues to build leaders and to give them platform for displaying their gifts, like this has for us.
And one of the things that I talked about when I did the interview with Channel 3, a lot of the conversation was about Black history, the Center for Black History. And I said, I love that idea, but sometimes, we forget that, we get lost in Black history, and we forget about Black present and Black future.
Right.
That we need to celebrate those who are going through the process of doing, and support them, to get those things done.
There's two things that I want to say. One is, sometimes the negative of things gets looked over. And I'm just really proud to have had you as my brother and my lifelong friend, and you as my lifelong friend. When I think about people talk, well, where are the role models and we need more Black, well, you all have been that role model to me in my life, affirming me. You all have been that role model into my kids' lives, affirming them. And to have labored directly and indirectly, together and from a distance, with you all over these past 30 plus years has just been an amazing experience for me. And there's no man that I respect more than you two. And
Thank you.
maybe I am gonna cry. There's no man that I respect more than you. In terms of how you've being how you serve the Lord, how you serve your community, how you served your families, you know, which is just amazing thing. And then I wanted to say that I'm so proud of you. We're proud of you. The vision and the weight that you've carried for the vision for these 30 some years, you know, and your steadfastness. And, you know, you've felt weak, but you never wavered away from the vision and the work. And so, you know, we're really proud of you. Yeah.
Thank you all. I appreciate that.
Kerr. Yes. I remember something at an early on meeting that you had when you were kind of introducing the center and the concept. And I remember, I believe it was you that said there'll be a lot of conversations about this project, because you had just given how much it was going to cost, you know, and I think you kind of expected a big,
Ooh.
yeah, when you said how much it was going to cost, and something you said there's going to be a lot of conversation about this. He said, but if you're not going to talk about it in a good way, don't talk about it in a bad way. You know, don't have coffees and sit down in restaurants and talk about, you know, who does he think he, you know, if you're going to talk about how you can be, you know, a conduit, or how you can be a help to
That's right.
to raising money. And I think that's so important for people to remember, for anything that anyone is doing. If you're not gonna talk about it in a good way, you know, don't put it down. If you can't help, don't hinder it. You know.
That's so good. You know, I'm sure we're getting at the end of our time. I can remember a couple of low points. I think it was our 10th or 15th. It wasn't. I mean, 5th or the 15th. It wasn't the 10th, because I remember the 10th. But I think the 15th. I think we might have had 8 people at our banquet. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but we had it in one of the meeting rooms at High Point. Like, it was just like one of the, like, when even in the cafeteria, like, just like one of the meeting rooms, like, with a folding door on it, because we didn't have enough people for a restaurant or anything. And I just thought, I think I'm about ready to quit this job. I don't think I want to do this anymore. Because, you know, your annual banquet is where you have your speaker come in.
Right.
You bring people.
Who was the speaker?
Oh, Lord. The speaker was Parker Palmer. And I was so proud to have him come. But the thing was, we just, I don't know, just seemed like we weren't connected with our partners, or we didn't have the right day, or programming was changing. But I just remember those were lean days. And he did a great job. He was very affirming. But it's just, we just weren't connected with the community. And another was, after 10 years of running that community support specialist program, it was a $300,000 contract. It doubled Nehemiah overnight in budget and staff. And we had to rebid it in 10 years. And it was 6 full-time positions. And they wanted to reduce it down to 4. And we were outbid in that process, and had to let people go, or have the agency that won the grant hire people who we had trained and developed. Those were some dark days. And you know, what I learned is that leadership is a lifelong process. It's not about today's failures or successes. So no matter how good or how bad it is today, get through today and keep going. But all of that was training for what I'm doing today. So it's been a wonderful journey. It's been tremendous 3-decade journey. I've had a chance to work with friends, to work with my family, and to hopefully touch the community in a way that's really meaningful.